Welcome to the Kolbe Cast, episode 138. Thank you for joining us. Today, Bonnie and I are joined by author, storyteller, and veteran Kolbe homeschooling mother, Kathryn Swegart. In addition to sharing her memories of homeschooling, Kathryn talks about the importance of reading to our children, the inspiration for her writing, and life after homeschooling. We really enjoyed our time with Kathryn, and I'm sure that you'll enjoy her thoughts and wisdom. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, liturgical musician, popcorn and podcast fanatic, and Kolbe homeschooling mom to 4 lads and lasses of middle and high school age.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Stephen, of all the Eucharistic miracle stories you're familiar with, do you have a favorite or one that really intrigues you?
Well, the recent one down in South America is very intriguing from just my science background with all of the research they've done to show that the Eucharist became flesh, but then they did all the studies on it and how it was from the heart, and it had to have been taken basically while the person was alive, and there's all the trauma and just they have so much scientific evidence that it's like impossible to say this isn't miraculous and this is what's going on. So I think that's what comes to mind first, at least, just again because it's so compelling right now.
Sure, that's so fascinating. How they're able to determine all that from all their tests, and then the results that they discover, all of that is just so moving and compelling to me. I'm not sure that I have a list topper, but I like I said, I find this topic so absorbing. When I was at the Midwest Catholic Family Conference this past August, I got to see the traveling exhibition of Eucharistic miracles curated by Blessed Carlo Acutis. Pretty neat to see, especially as his cause for canonization is moving forward and timely for today's conversation. Our guest today has authored books that many of our listeners may have in their home libraries or wish lists. We are delighted to claim her as a Kolbe mom and visit with her a bit today. Mrs. Kathryn Swegart, welcome to the Kolbe Cast.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. I've been looking forward to visiting with you. This is a real treat. I have taken notice of your books, and then when the opportunity presented itself to get to talk to you, I was like, oh, yet again, it was such a privilege and pleasure to have these opportunities here on the Kolbe Cast to visit with folks like you. So I led off with highlighting the book that you wrote called Miraculous, Catholic Miracles for Kids, because I greatly enjoyed that and have since gone hunting for more info about the Holy House of Loreto. You have several published titles to your name, including Lucia, which won first place in the 2022 Catholic Media Awards Best Books for Young Readers. Congratulations.
Thank you. I was very excited.
Sure. Yeah. Let's go back a bit to that bit about you being a Kolbe mom, though. Would you tell us your Kolbe story and a bit more about yourself and your writing?
Well, sure. First of all, I've been married 41 years to my husband. We live in a small farm in Maine, and we moved up here from Cape Cod in 1993, and we felt it would be a good place. We have about 5 acres for the kids to live in a rural environment and homeschool. And it was a good combination. They learned to do chores. We had dairy goats. They had to milk, twice a day, no matter what the weather, and process it. And we had a beef calf and chickens, and pictures of our sons trying to eat the chicken that he had bonded with, but couldn't quite do that. Oh. And they loved it. They love Maine. They love the winters. Up until 8th grade, I kind of chose my own curriculum because I really felt that it was, as long as we got the basics of getting their reading, the phonics going, and their math. And then we did a lot with music. They did for many, many, many years, Suzuki violin. Our daughter was like 3 when she started. And also one of our sons did the piano. So there was kind of this balance of the academics, which we would do early, right away, and then the chores and the music. And that was kind of, you can't do everything. You can't be doing everything. So that's kind of what we chose. But then when 9th grade rolled along, and our son, our 2 sons were still in middle school, but our daughter, Kathryn, who I will say she was a pretty gifted student. Back on Cape Cod, it's kind of a funny story. When we had to kind of prove to the principal why we were not going to send her to public school. And I didn't really want her to be kind of interviewed by the principal. So I did a recording of her, and we had read over and over The Velveteen Rabbit. And she had listened to the audio of Meryl Streep reading it. So she could say it with a British accent. So the principal heard it and said, okay, that's enough. Many, many trips to the library, and we just love books. We have books all around. We'll hopefully talk a little bit about that later. But then ninth grade rolled around, and I said to Kathryn, do you want me to keep picking out a curriculum, or do you want us to buy a curriculum? And she looked at me like, Mom, we need to buy a curriculum. No offense. So we did. And so I was doing the math. We used the Kolbe High School curriculum for 11 years.
Okay.
It's a bit of a space between Kathryn, who's going to be 40 next year, and our youngest, Peter, he just turned 33. So there was a little bit of a gap. So we were doing it for a long time. I always felt it was very solid. I always felt very secured. I said, we're doing Kolbe, and we know that it's going to work. And it's giving them a solid foundation. So it gave me a lot of comfort and less anxiety, I would say, by using it, because you know what you're doing.
Right. Yep. How did you hear about Kolbe? Were you kind of aware of it from the years you were choosing your own curriculum?
Oh, that's a good question. I was trying to remember who might have been using it, because as I said, there weren't that many people, especially in New England. There weren't that many homeschoolers. Through recommendations from friends, I would say that would be the best answer. Yeah.
Okay.
There weren't really, I mean, probably Seton and Kolbe maybe as providers at that point, as far as Catholic.
Right.
Would be my guess. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And this would be the offline version, what we are referring to now as the traditional homeschool.
Right.
Yes.
The internet was just not that visible. So that would have been from around 1998. And then our son, Peter, he graduated in 2008. So it was about 10 or 11 years. So those are the years that we were doing it.
Okay. So thinking back on your homeschooling days, what standout memories come to mind?
Well, I think partly it's, as I said, the good balance that you can have and the freedom and you get first thing in the morning. The memory I have is, especially in the winter, if you get up early and do your math first, you can have hot chocolate.
Oh, nice.
While you're doing your math. And it worked. Actually, it did work.
Well, sure.
Which was kind of fun to do. I think also with our son Peter, he's not married. He's a musician, he's a composer, he's a poet, and he's a reader, and he reads books all the time. They're this thick, and he's very creative. You know how your kids all have these different temperaments. I've kind of investigated the 4 classic temperaments, and he's definitely double introvert and mulls over things. And one of my favorite memories of him, I actually dug it out at the last minute, was thanks to the writing that we did. Obviously, I think every homeschooler has their strengths and weaknesses, and ours was writing. And I don't know if you ever heard of Stone Soup magazine. There are articles that, I don't know if it's still around, but the kids write. And Peter, I went out in the woods with him, and he dictated basically a story called The Paper Boat. And he made up a story and he made the boat, and he put it through the water. And like he said, I know the woods by heart. I'm going where there's a big rock. He was 7 when he wrote that. And a waterfall flowing over the rocks. It's beautiful. I hear the trickling water. The water looks orange, yellow, and green because all the leaves have fallen in the water. They float. And then he goes on to describe it, and then imaginary story that he makes up. And then it got published in there. And it just, I think with homeschooling like that, there's a certain freedom, and it's very efficient. Okay, we find a nice fall day. We don't have to schedule a field trip. We just go out there, and I just took notes of what he was saying. and it was a lot of fun. And that was definitely a highlight for us. We also, as I said, we raised guide dogs. That was a community project that the kids did, socializing them. They were like 8 weeks old to about a year and a half. And they loved doing that. They were very good at training them, not of course for the blind person, but just socializing them, bringing them to the bank, bringing them to the library. And I think that was a standout. And because we were homeschooling and this was in high school, we were doing the guide dogs, we were able to have time to do a community service project like that. And I think they really did enjoy it. And they were doing it, even though they loved the dogs, it was hard to give up the dogs after about a year and a half, but they were doing it, this kind of self-sacrificing love. So it was a real good lesson. Of the 3 dogs we had, they're all Labrador retrievers. One of them did become a guide dog. It's very difficult. They have to be super confident to qualify through the guiding eyes for the blind. So that was a real highlight. And also, I will say, our daughter, as I said, Kathryn is a gifted scholar. One day when she was a senior, and she was very diligent about the Kolbe curriculum. I took a walk at lunchtime, and I came back and I saw a letter on the back door, the kitchen door, and it said, "Congratulations, you just got a full scholarship to the University of Dallas." And I was like,
whoa.
it was very exciting. And I give Kolbe credit. I mean, the discipline of it. And I will add another story. So she did go to University of Dallas, wonderful experience, met her husband there, who was from Louisiana. Now they live in Louisiana and have 6 kids. And her goal for going to college was, I want to find my vocation, which is pretty mature.
Mm-hmm.
And then Daniel, when his first year, he went to St. Anselm's in New Hampshire. It's a Benedictine college. And it was a little overwhelming, I think, being in homeschool and going into all of the classes, a very different environment. But he's very outgoing and likable, and he loved it. They were very busy. But he wrote me a note, and he said, "Mom, thank you for teaching me how to write, because it was so important in college."
Mm-hmm.
And I give credit to Kolbe Academy. Thank you.
It sounds like you brought a lot of your gifts, and you're particularly skilled and gifted in that area as well. And you put the two together, and that really served them well. It sounds like that's wonderful.
It did.
It seems to me the environment that you put your children in, it was an ideal for growing that sense of wonder and letting as you say, being able to go out into the woods and having your son listening for the stream and seeing those colors. And I grew up in rural Wisconsin, but our kids were largely raised in Southern California. But just a year and a half ago or so, we moved to rural Arkansas, and we've just seen that sort of where it's like, oh, look, a snake. I'm going to have a pet snake now, and seeing how the snake grows and sheds its skin, and or whatever it happens to be, just that chance to, or the opportunity to observe and to look at things in a different way, I guess, which I think that seems like an important part of your family's education as well.
It was. And I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. By the way, the religion program of Catholic apologetics and all of your program, I learned right along with them. That was something I always sat down on a regular basis, and we went through it together, because I'm a cradle Catholic, but I would say I didn't really have a good catechesis, and it really helped me too. I think it really grounded me, also learning right along with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I will add one other thing about the homeschooling experience. We try to have it varied, but I did not spoon feed them. I didn't sit down, and especially if somebody has a large family, we have had 3 kids, but I could not sit down and teach this one math, that one math, this one, whatever subject. They had to be pretty independent. I would check in with them to see how they were doing. I'm not strong in math. I'm just saying some of these things so people don't think you have to be super mom, super intelligent in everything that you do, every subject.
Right.
I remember when we got the pre-calculus book for Kathryn, I just said, here, kind of, she had to kind of figure it out herself. Let's put it that way. She was used to reading. She became an English major, but now she's a nurse practitioner, which is pretty amazing because the first time we gave her the biology book, it was pretty challenging for her, the biology book from Kolbe, and she started to cry when she started doing it because she was used to excelling in all the other stuff, and it was challenging for her. This was so new.
Yeah.
But she got through it. And it was a good foundation for her because even though she was an English major at UD, it grounded her when she started to take training as a nurse, I really think. So, I think that's the beauty of Kolbe also. I am not really strong in science or math, but relying on your expertise and the materials that you provide, the high quality, I knew they were getting what they needed.
Mm-hmm. So for the Kolbe high schoolers who are listening or their parents who are working through the high school curriculum in particular, and hear you talk about taking care of your animals on your land and the guide dog, that's amazing, that whole endeavor that you all undertook. How did you all make it work accomplishing the Kolbe schoolwork, especially the high school course load, and have ample time for the other things that you all were involved in?
Well, I have to get up early.
Yeah.
I use the incentive of hot chocolate if you start your math. So starting early, getting as much done before lunchtime as you can, the academics.
Okay.
They did have to go out and take care of the goats too. But so that was a really big, important part of it. And they could sense, that once lunchtime rolled around, and then there was more freedom. Then they would do their music in the afternoon or would go. We did go, another thing, we went to the library on a regular basis and always were reading aloud to them. And they always had books. So I would say my recommendation is, they really do have to get up, quite early. I'm saying 7:00 in the morning and getting things started and getting that routine set. Okay, this is the expectation. It's a reasonable expectation and the incentive. If you get your academics done first, you get more freedom. It's very efficient.
Yeah, I was a public school product myself, but I enjoy that with my children that, for me it was okay, I get the lesson done in school or whatever. If I was doing that, then that's where I would grab a book and start reading, but then that was constantly interrupted and the days, 8 hours long or whatever. And it's just nice to know that, oh, wait, if you just get stuff done efficiently, then it's all free. It's not that you have to still sit there, kind of the position I was in. So it's one of those lovely things about homeschooling, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a built-in incentive right there, and it's efficient.
Ends up serving them well as adults as well when they have to direct their own schedule. Yeah. Well, not too long ago on episode 131, we visited with Danielle Bean, and one of the things she talked about valuing homeschool for was the space for relationships among her children and with herself and her husband to develop. Have you noticed a correlation between your children being homeschooled and the relationships that they now have?
Yes, I do. I think especially between Daniel, who's 5 years older than Peter, our youngest, they became very close, and they rode bikes together and tramped out in the field, in the woods, and they did all of that, and ice skating. We lived near ponds, and they could go ice skating together, and they still hug each other. They love each other. And Dan's a very good big brother. Like if things aren't going well for him, he's the one that his younger brother will turn to, even though Peter's 33 now. And, be honest with you, when things aren't going well, now that they're young adults, Peter's 33, there are certain things I can't really talk about with Peter, but he can talk about it with his brother. Mm-hmm. And and it is a relief. And then, it's funny, we don't, our daughter lives in Louisiana. We don't get to see all three of our kids together very often, but when they get together, they get out their violin, they get out the mandolins, and they play together like they practice every week. It's just amazing.
Wonderful.
So I think in our case, they really do. I think it does nurture a special closeness because they can have more time together and doing things that they enjoy together. And I think even Katie said she was 7 years older than Peter when he was born. It really fed into her nurturing personality, which, having 6 children, it was a very natural thing for her. So I agree with Danielle that it definitely does build positive relationships that are lifelong with siblings.
I'm very glad to hear that. I'm hopeful. When you were nearing the end of your active homeschooling days, what did the impending transition look like for you? Had you been writing that all along? Had that always been an interest of yours? And kind of what was that like for you as you were nearing the end of the Kolbe days?
Well, I had been writing all along, keeping journals. What they say, writers don't want to write, they need to write. Just keeping something that nobody would ever read or anything of that nature. It took a few years. We kind of went away from Maine for 3 years as we worked as house parents down in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and then in Springfield, Massachusetts. And then I came back. I don't really feel like I had too much of an empty nest syndrome, you might say. We were ready to move on, and Peter went to the University of Southern Maine. And, we went off to Hershey, and there is life after homeschooling.
Right.
Sometimes you think you just kind of immersed in the moment, which is good. But I never visualized really what happened with my writing, because I never really had that much time to devote to it or even know what would be good for me to write. And I, one summer day, I think it was in 2015, I've been working in a school as adult support for special needs children. We had the summers off. And so a neighbor of ours brought over Eucharistic Miracles, of the World, the book that the exhibition is based on. And I was looking at it and I thought, I wonder if you could write children's stories about the Eucharistic miracles. And at first I was like, no, because you kind of think of the same type of Eucharistic miracle where the consecrated host becomes flesh. And I didn't really know how you could write a story about that. Well, turns out there are all kinds of Eucharistic miracles. So I actually basically wrote these 10 stories in one summer. They're all short stories, about 1,000, 2,000 words. And then in 2018, I self-published, got an artist to do a little, some illustrations, and John Foley, who's a very fine artist, he did the cover and put it up on Amazon. No advertising, unknown writer, self-published. In April of 2019, it was the #1 book in Roman Catholic books. I'm like, what? Right up there with Scott Hahn and Henri Nouwen, I'm like, this is all about, God. I think like our Blessed Mother was my PR person or something, it was, and it just kind of, you know what it was, Bonnie? It was that I wrote books that I wished I had for my kids. Mm-hmm. And I know the people who are reading them. A lot of them are probably homeschoolers. And I really wanted to bring stories from the treasury of the Catholic faith and bring it down so it's not preachy, that they're exciting stories with a real punch to them and that are engaging. I do have a real special spot for reading aloud to children because they're short, that people read them aloud. They can read them aloud before the kids go to bed or at religious education classes. And I didn't really know that at the time. So that's kind of where it all launched. Don't ask me how it happened. I think it had to be that God had wanted to bring these books to kids, and I was, working with them on it. So that was it.
And now you have several published. You have that Eucharistic Miracles book. You have one called Rescued. And Lucia, in addition to your books, you also write for Magnificat and CatholicMom.com. I was enjoying several of your posts on Catholic Mom the other day, getting ready for this recording. That's, yeah.
It's just kind of been organic and grassroots. And I don't know what you want to say. It just kind of, and it's a dream job for me, really. I don't even consider it a job, really. But I get up early in the morning kind of modeled after the homeschooling model. Get up early and do your work, right? Have a cup of tea. I read the Magnificat. But I just work about an hour a day on the stories, and then I'm pretty much done, and it works. It's a good thing, and it's very rewarding. I love the stories. Some of the ones in Rescued, especially the one that came out this year about Don Fendler. I don't know if you know that story. I'm evangelizing non-Maine, state of Maine residents about Don Fendler. He was a Catholic, a young boy who's Catholic who was 12, and he was lost on Mount Katahdin for 9 days. So it's a remarkable story. And the kids in Maine know this story because he survived, of course, and he would visit the schools for years and years and years and tell his story. And it is about, he believed his guardian angel. It's a very excruciating story to read because how is he ever going to get out of this? But he literally felt his guardian angel lift him up when he had given up, and shortly thereafter he was rescued. And it's a very amazing story. And he didn't even want to talk about the presence of his guardian angel that was with him on the mountain, urging him on. And the cover of it is the bear, the black bear. In fact, John Foley did it, and I thought, wow, this is kind of scary, And but I asked a 7-year-old girls, do you think this cover is too scary? She said, oh no, that's not too scary. No. But that actually happened where he startled a black bear, and the black bear reared up right over him and was blood curdling cry, but fortunately ran the other way. So these are the kind of stories I love. Stories that really are exciting, but also without preaching, of course, teach how this boy had to rely on his guardian angel, he prayed every day, had to rely God was going to get me out of this. And honestly, it's kind of funny. I get sort of choked up even reading at the end. And I was just reading this really fun biography about E.B. White. And when he was older, he did get dementia, but his son would read him Charlotte's Web, and he would actually cry, even though he had written the book. He would cry about Charlotte's death. It really was beautiful. But so it all kind of took off on its own. Thanks be to God. So I'm just glad that people are building. I'm trying to build the faith of families and support them in the best way that I can through this gift that God has enlightened me to.
It seems like we've touched a few times on all these miraculous things, and it sounds as if at least being drawn to telling about these miraculous things seems like something that was there a time, has it always been there, or was it just kind of inspiration when you saw that Eucharistic Miracles book and just decided this is what I need, the story I need to tell, or what's the origin of that?
I think you're right, Stephen, that I am sort of drawn to the supernatural aspect of things. I've written actually a few things that have happened to me in a nutshell. It will be out in the Magnificat next year, how I feel my guardian angel. I have that in the beginning of Rescued Me. I was outside and was caught in an F3 tornado and was starting to go airborne. And I really felt like I almost was lassoed around the ankles and was pulled down and survived, obviously. It was a very close call. People who saw it happen just thought I was a goner, So I think yes, Stephen, I think I am drawn to supernatural. And I think kids are too. I think they like stories like that. And, there's so many, especially in miraculous, I really wanted to bring to children, Catholic young people, some of the major stories that are in there, like the Miracle of the Sun, like the Tilma. We just celebrated Our Lady of Guadalupe yesterday. They're incredible stories, and they're true. And I love the children of Fatima. Their stories are remarkable. And the fact that you can look at a photograph of them, it's just remarkable. So yes, I think, Stephen, I am drawn to that. Although some of the aspects in, especially Rescued, they're more of a lot about human courage of doing risking their lives to save other people, like Monsignor Hugh O'Flaherty, who rescued prisoners of war from the Nazis. It was made into Scarlet and the Black, which is a great movie with Gregory Peck. So, yeah, I think they make for good stories, things of the supernatural.
I think it's really needed today. I mean, from my own experience, I know that like the House of Loretto exists and things now. It didn't until a couple of years ago, and all of these miracles are real. But still, I find myself like the first time I heard of the House of Loretto traveling from the Holy Land Road, I was like, no, this stuff doesn't really happen. This is just
Yeah.
fairy tales. And then I'm like, what am I talking about? Obviously, this is. But I think in today's world, we lose, especially for our children, they aren't getting exposed to, no, these are things that really do happen. Your guardian angel isn't just this little story we tell you to make you feel better about going to bed at night. This is an angel who is watching out for you. Develop your relationship, your friendship with this angel, and then giving them examples of heroic virtue, because I was just thinking about this as getting ready for the podcast. I mean, what heroes are out there today for people? I mean, they keep tearing down it seems to me, all of the heroic figures, and not, well, they had a fault, so they can't be, they can't be a hero anymore. So getting those examples of people who act heroically, I just think is so important for our kids. So I could see that the Holy Spirit working, drawing you in this way, because it's a need. I really think it's a huge need for young people today.
Yeah, and it helps to build our faith and our hope. Like I am fascinated by the Shroud of Turin too. I mean, that's where science and faith come together, right? That has been really studied, and you have to really do a lot of mental gymnastics to think that it's not really what it is,
Right, yes.
Okay, a shroud, a cloth that they first took a photograph of it. It was the first photograph taken of the shroud in the 1800s, just when photography was getting underway. It was one of the first examples of indoor photography. Secondo Pia did it, and he didn't know what he was going to get when he took the picture of the shroud. He was given permission, of course, rushes back to his lab, and it's developed. And there's a face of Jesus, the tortured face of Jesus in his tank. I mean, can you imagine that moment?
I've tried
How
to.
how would an artist, however old the shroud is, hundreds of years old, extra, create it's just beyond anything you can possibly imagine, really.
Yes. And it's so important. I mean, if you know that God is working, and there's these examples, as you're saying, the Shroud of Turin is just one of those things, again, that you have to make the choice not to believe it. I mean, you can't go down a scientific route and try to disprove it. It's just impossible. But to know that God works in these just incredible ways, what confidence does that instill? It's like, help me to get through this tough day, God. Well, if you can do that, you can certainly take care of the problems that I'm facing in the daily sort of realms. But again, we forget that at times. We stop, well, at least for me, don't think about praying, don't think about asking God for his help, or trusting that he's got this all taken care of. I don't need to worry about it. So it's focusing on the miraculous, I think, is a good way to remind us of his providence and goodness.
I like the timing, the providential timing of how these stories come out to further the conversation between faith and science and faith and reason. I think they play such significant roles in that.
And there's a wonderful book I read recently, Is Atheism Dead? By Eric Metaxas. And it's a fascinating book. It's very readable. He actually wrote for VeggieTales, so he's got a good touch.
Right.
And but he really looks at the hardest argument, I guess, Christopher Hitchens had to deal with. What is the hardest thing to you refute from somebody who believes in God? And it's the fine tuning of the universe. I mean, I'm looking out here. at an apple tree, or leaves, or just, and it's quite a book because it's just irrefutable that there had to be a designer behind this, that there had to be a creator. And of course, also the Big Bang Theory, 13.8 billion years ago, there was a beginning. Atheists tend to need for evolution to really work, their brand of evolution has to go back probably trillions of years. But, when there's a cutoff, 13.8 billion years ago, something big happened. Once again, first cause, what caused the Big Bang? How would an atheist answer that?
Right.
So in addition to your writing, are you still working with guide dogs, or what other interests and involvements and pursuits keep you busy?
Well, no, the guide dog project, it was very rewarding, but it was for the kids. The kids left, no more goats, no more chickens, no more chickens. So, I do enjoy dogs and things, but we did, it freed us up. We're secular Franciscans in the Third Order. And so we professed as secular Franciscans, and we actually were able to go to Italy on a pilgrimage to Assisi in 2019, just before everything started happening. And it was a fabulous trip. And I'm not a traveler. And we did very well. We were with a small group of secular Franciscans and two Franciscan priests, friars, and a brother. And that was wonderful. We actually talk about the supernatural. We went to on Laverna where St. Francis received the stigmata. And it's a little tiny chapel. Laverna is a very isolated place up on the hills, very rugged. It's to this day, there's not much, civilization there. And we actually saw the actual spot. It's not very big. It's maybe by, 2 feet by 2 feet. They have a marker there that's where St. Francis received his stigmata. And we actually were overjoyed to be able to have mass in that little chapel. It was pretty amazing. So that's been a very big part of our work as secular Franciscans. We do pray every Thursday down at an abortion clinic, a prayer, peaceful prayer through the 40 Days for Life too. Let's see. And I don't know, I think my husband and I really enjoy kind of not having the responsibility, of taking care of the kids. And we are enjoying our time together, be able to just go out for walks together. We go to mass daily, more often than we had been in the past. We help out a nutrition center. We support an adult with intellectual disabilities also, which has been very rewarding for us. And, I think it's wonderful. Some people would think he can't talk. He's very limited. He pretty much can't talk or communicate. But, he's learned, and we've learned that if you give him jobs like working at the nutrition center with us, he can sort bread, he can sort cookies, he can carry boxes. And, the value of work, you can see he gets it's a thing he looks forward to as best he can communicate that to us. So that's been a wonderful thing. And let's see. So I think, the free time has been good. I do a lot more reading, try to picking up playing the piano. I'm not very good at it, but as long as nobody listens to me playing, I'm okay, So yeah, those are kind of the things that we like to do. It's God has blessed us. We have good health, and it's been a good, beautiful kind of retirement. And seeing the grandkids, of course, it's really a lot of fun. They crack me up,
Yes.
And they do. I have to say, they do a wonderful job with them, raising them in the Catholic faith and having books everywhere. Just books. Although I did get a little tired of reading Angelina Ballerina to my 6-year-old daughter. You mean there's another Angelina Ballerina book?
Yes. It's you say retirement, but as you're updating your website and producing books, and it seems, I guess you can call that retirement. It seems like you're still in the thick of activities and doing things. So
well, thank you, Stephen. Yeah, it is. I would not want to just sit back and not do anything.
Yeah, right.
It wouldn't be too good. It's just been really rewarding. And I, as I said, when we were in the thick of things, homeschooling with the Kolbe curriculum, I never pictured it. God plans things, thinks bigger than we do. He figures it out. I could never have figured it out. Nope.
Yeah, as you were telling your story, I was thinking about that too, because, as you go along, you think, I should have everything together. I should know my vocation, just kind of as your daughter was going off to college thinking, what's my vocation? And it seems like the more as I get older, that vocation probably is all laid out it's clearly laid out to God, but it's changes, right? So it's doing what's in front of you. And it's okay if you don't have everything figured out. It's like, well, I haven't started the Jesuits yet. I haven't done these huge things that I'd like to do for God, but he's got plans. It's just doing what he needs you to do now, I guess, and then waiting. And then there are those books come that you throw out on Amazon that become one of the top sellers for the Catholic books and things. So yeah, you can plan those out yourself. You can't, right?
Yeah, and I think, as I said, being in the thick of homeschooling, you don't think beyond homeschooling. Honestly, I mean, you help them plan for college, and you take them on tours of the different colleges, but you just have to be faithful to the tasks and being there for them every day in little ways, and being consistent and being steady, and that's the way I did homeschooling. And that's the way I'm doing writing. I don't do, some people write 6 hours a day. I could never do that. This is write a novel month in November, write 50,000 words. And to me, that would be torture. I could never do that,
Right.
So I just think for, the listeners, I encourage them, you're doing the right thing. And another thing about homeschoolers is that homeschoolers never think they're doing enough.
Right.
But that's the beauty of the Kolbe curriculum. If you stick with it, do the best you can. I certainly was not perfect in what I did, and had to scramble every end of the semester to get my paperwork together. It's like, you think you would have learned by now, but just encourage. I'm just I was a regular homeschooling mom like you, and I don't have spectacular skills in it. And I can remember walking around with the math book, the Saxon Math, and clutching it with the answer key, trying to help Peter with it,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that was tough. But, you just keep doing it. And, and now I think that there's more, from what I understand, Kolbe has more access to support, if you really are struggling. And that I'm sure, they would have helped me if I called, but I think that's probably more of your program now. You don't feel so alone.
Right. Well, you've mentioned already, let's talk some more about the interests that you have in and the importance you place on reading aloud to children. What do you see as important or helpful in approaching and accomplishing that?
Well, it's easy. It's fun. This book I have here, The Enchanted Hour by Megan Cox-Gurdon. There'll be links, I think, that you'll talk about, Bonnie.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think this is a comfort to somebody who's homeschooling. If I ask you, what is the best thing that you can do educationally for your child? You might think it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to be really hard. But you know what it is? Well, as Megan's book says, the miraculous power of reading aloud in the age of distraction, that there is a lot of brain research going on. There's a medical center in Cincinnati where they actually will kind of, I don't know how they do it, put kids in an MRI, but they make it fun. You're going into a rocket ship, and the kids listen to stories. They see pictures of stories, and they see, especially really little kids, it's never too early to start reading to your kids. I mean, babies, because their brains are just developing so exponentially. I think they're 85% growth by the age 5. It builds their vocabulary, builds their imaginations. Of course, there's also, when you're snuggling next to them, there's that feeling of security. This Megan talks a lot about Goodnight Moon. Now, who has not read Goodnight Moon to your kids and have all those pictures memorized,
Mm-hmm.
So Megan calls it a magic elixir. Now, Megan is the children's book reviewer for the Wall Street Journal. She raised 5 kids, and she weaves her story of raising 5 kids and the importance that even after they know how to read, even when they're teenagers, she reads to them. And it's the thing that's so beautiful about it is it's just fun and it's so natural. Kids and books go together. So even if, well, I'll tell you, my son and Dan and his wonderful wife Kelly with the 5 kids, they are getting ready to move. And she's homeschooling one of their kids, their 6-year-old, but she's trying to pack and she's trying to, and she's very serious. She's about anything that she does. She works very hard, but she's having a lot of trouble. They're supposed to move January 6th. Trying to keep it going. And I said to Dan, as I said in this podcast, the best thing she can do is just take a deep breath, sit down and read to the kids. They have beautiful books all over the house, just wonderful books. And it's good for her. It's good for the kids. And even if that's the only thing you do all day, feel good about it. And don't underestimate the power of reading aloud, please.
I'm glad you spoke to that too, about continuing to read after they can read to themselves, continuing to read aloud to them. That's been something I've tried to continue with less frequency. I used to read aloud a lot, and we used to drive to parochial school and listen to a lot of audiobooks that way to pass that time. And we've gotten through some wonderful books that we wouldn't have read when they were younger, right? That it's good reconnection time too, as the kids have gotten older.
And Sarah Mackenzie I think she might be Catholic. I'm not sure, but she's very popular. I think she has a podcast, and the Read-Aloud family is really, really good because she just gives the nuts and bolts, a lot of practical tips. You don't have to have the kids sitting perfectly straight, listening to every word that you read. They can be drawing, or they can be playing with their Legos, or, just kind of integrate it as best that you can. And I wish these books were out. We were doing a lot of what they're talking about. We didn't realize that it was the right thing to do at the time.
Right.
So I think there's a lot to be encouraged about and to appreciate. And of course, limiting screen time is valuable because, it needs to have limits put on it. But that's a whole other issue, a whole other topic. But I just like to encourage and appreciate the need and the beauty of reading aloud to your children, even as a family.
My youngest is 8 now, and I think in our family, I think the problem is oftentimes people just scatter everywhere after dinner. I'm not sure if it's related to not wanting to help clean up dishes or just because there's other interesting things to do. But so we've been able to take advantage right now of some cooler weather. So we've got one fireplace in our home, and we've been lighting the fires right at dinner time here. So everybody, like just last night, everybody was down around the fire, chatting, and my wife pulled out the books. It worked that way. But I have to admit that oftentimes we're just not very good about kind of bringing everybody together. We're just like, oh, they're off doing their things. I don't want to bother them. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice when it happens. So I should be deliberate about it. I know, but challenge.
It can easily be the first thing to go, though, when things get busy. So I have enjoyed audiobooks and found them very useful with the kids, especially driving places. What do you think about the place of audiobooks in accomplishing some of this reading aloud?
I think audiobooks are a good thing for to listen to, like, when you're traveling. We have done it. It's kind of a second choice, I'd say, towards the immediacy of a parent. By the way, Jim Trelease, who's a pioneer for the Read-Aloud movement, he strongly advocated fathers reading to children and having children see you reading a book. Yeah. Simple things, like, oh, look, Dad's reading. Dad's a very important part of this. It really is. But I think audiobooks are good. We actually, I think it was last winter, we listened to the Fellowship of the Ring. This actor who read them was phenomenal. I think he's English, and I can't think of his name, but I mean, how did he switch from doing all those voices? And It was amazing. So we would listen to it, my husband and I, while we were eating. And sometimes these long, dark winters, Maine winters, are a good thing. Kind of can wrap the day up early, and we would listen to it while we were eating our meal. So I think audiobooks are a good thing. Absolutely.
Definitely found them to have a place among the other things that we're doing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have mentioned a few books and resources already. Are there any others you want to mention? We will put some links in our show notes that you've provided for us.
Yeah. The other one, Honey for a Child's Heart by Gladys Hunt. This is not like the previous one. The Enchanted Hour is excellent, but it's more secular. She doesn't really get into things that would build up, characters and that would be pleasing in the eyes of God. But Honey for a Child's Heart, and this is 2021, so it's pretty updated. The imaginative use of books in family life. And the thing that's really good about her is I would recommend, if you say you go to the library and I don't know what books to get. Where do I begin? Do I really want to read Bob SquarePants? I forget how it is. Or Diary of a Wimpy Kid, there must be something a little elevated to that. But this is a very good best loved books for children, classic children's novels, and she'll break it down ages 9 to 12. Of course, Charlotte's Web is really up there, and The Lion, the Witch, and the Roar, the Narnia series is way up there. Caddy Woodlong. So I like the Honey for a Child's Heart because it has a list of books, good tools for you, and descriptions of them and the age that it's appropriate for. So I think those are good. Megan's book is good, but she doesn't really describe the books, and she doesn't really have them divided into ages. So even if, like, we live in a kind of a rural area, so if I see books that I want to read, we read for every other week to our grandchildren, three of the grandchildren in Louisiana. We do a Zoom, and it's been good. They've been looking forward to it. So I will use some of these books as resources, and then they can get it through interlibrary loan if they don't have it. So you can get almost any book. So Honey for a Child's Heart probably would be my first recommendation if you really want something. I think Sarah Mackenzie's The Read-Aloud Family is excellent. She's it's kind of geared for homeschoolers, actually. And she really tells you, like Stephen was saying, it's just too busy. I can't, how do you get around that? Maybe when they're sorting the socks, we could read. That kind of thing. She's got a good sense of humor.
Yeah.
And so those are three right solid ones right there. And Jim Trelease is good also. I don't think he's writing anymore, but so there's a lot. It's really there's a lot out there on it and the importance of it.
You just said something that I was mentioning, everybody fleeing after dishes or during dishes. That would be a great time to read, right? Well, this is one person's job is to read while the rest of them are washing and things. That would work out. I'll have to give that a try, I think.
Yeah, Stephen, you can sit there at the table, read, pick the book and you read while they're doing their chores. That's excellent.
Yeah, I like this idea. I'm going to have to try to implement this.
How come Dad gets to sit and read while we have to do the dishes?
Yeah. I'll let them read then if they really complain too much. But
sure.
Yeah, I'll have to give that a try.
Lots of good come from that. We will have links to these suggestions in our show notes to check out, pardon the pun, check out the books that you're suggesting, Kathryn. Kolbe also publishes a book list, and we will put that in our show notes as well. I have found that the books that we don't get to in our Kolbe literature studies, so we pick out a few from, elementary and junior high literature, then there are all these other books that we don't get to. So those are also ones I have sometimes used for read-alouds. And then the other books by those authors. So the one that comes to mind first is Louisa May Alcott, several books that she has written, not the Little Women series, several other ones, Rose and Bloom and Eight Cousins. Those were ones we enjoyed very much, and Under the Lilacs and things like that. So it's been a good jumping off point to find other stuff that we can enjoy together. So lots of good stuff in our show notes today. As we're wrapping up here, do you have any final thoughts or takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I would say enjoy what you're doing. I mean, I did enjoy it, and it does actually come to an end eventually, but persevere and find security in having the wonderful support of Kolbe Academy, which has just expanded since we were doing it. So you're not alone out there, and you're doing a good thing. It's really worth the effort, and so just carry on.
Okay, that's very encouraging. We'll be on the lookout for more good stuff to come from you. You have one out this year. What's next for you?
Well, I'm actually working on, let me see, where's my list here? Okay, I'm working on Miraculous 2. So I've already written, and it's going to be usually about 10 stories. That'll come out next year, hopefully. I've already written one on Jacinta. She was a remarkable little girl. The beauty thing about writing about the children of Fatima is that they're children, and children can relate to them. And wow. And I just finished, I did the story on Saint Bernadette. I haven't really written much about her, and it's remarkable how really, really poor that family was. They lived in an abandoned jail. I mean,
yeah,
it was incredible. I'm also writing on Father Sebastian Rall, who's really not very well known. He was a Jesuit. He was on the list of North American martyrs. These are all going to be in this short story version, and he lived for 30 years with the Abenakis in Maine, and he was much hated by the British, and they wanted his scalp. And the miraculous aspect that I am writing about is that one time the British ambushed the village, and he was warned they were coming, and he had a bad leg. He lived to be 70, and this was later in his life. And he ran to the tabernacle. He consumed the host, got the sacred vessels, and limped in the deep snow and hid behind a tree, the only tree he could get to in time. And it was a skinny little birch tree that didn't hide him at all. And the British didn't see him. And it was a little miracle of how did he escape? So those are 3 of the stories I'm working on now. And so next year, Miraculous 2.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Kathryn, what a pleasure it's been to meet you and visit with you and prepare this episode with you. Thank you so much for coming to visit with us.
Well, thank you. It's been fun thinking about homeschooling. It's been a while, but it really did bring back memories. So thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed it.
Subscribe to the Kolbe Cast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, pray for us. Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam.